The objective of this example, this module, is simply to configure and test Apache Tomcat on our Windows 10 machine. Custom development is going to be saved for later modules, essentially the next module. With regard to machine requirements, you will need to have the Java Development Kit JDK installed on your Windows 10 machine, and we're going to talk about in this module how to install Apache Tomcat. With regard to knowledge requirements, you'll need to have some basic background in Java development, but nothing too extensive. And you can check out resource 700 as a supplement to the material that we present here. You may also download our project source code files from the folder that's labeled Tomcat 10. So let's go ahead and jump into the first step of this example, which is configuring our Windows machine. So we need to download and configure Apache Tomcat on our Windows machine. The source files may be found on the Tomcat homepage. You can simply just Google Apache Tomcat and that will come up. It's tomcat.apache.org. There's really no installation per se that's needed, and what I mean by that is there's not a Windows installation file that's going to be provided. It's simply going to be a zip file that we're going to have to unpackage and put it in the proper place on our machine. So there's 4 steps, which I'm going to call steps A through D. So step A is to download the zip file from the Tomcat webpage and unzip it on our PC. Or actually, step A is to download, step B is to unzip it. Step C is to rename our folder to Tomcat 10. We don't necessarily have to use that name. I'm going to use the name Tomcat 10 as the root or base folder for our projects, which is also going to contain the unzipped Tomcat files. And then the last step, step D, is to define the Windows environmental variable referred to as Catalina_home to our Tomcat folder. So this is a little screenshot from the Tomcat webpage. You'll see that we're going to click on the download link. That'll take us to the screen below. We're going to be downloading version 10.0.4, and really all we have to do is just click on this link here, and that'll give us or provide us the zip file that we need. Now, what happens once it's downloaded onto our machine? So it's going to end up most likely in our downloads folder. We're going to need to move it from our downloads folder, unzip it and move it to the project folder, which in our case is module 4 servlet underscore resources. So this is the project folder that we're going to be using. Now, if you've done the download and unzip properly, you should see that your project folder or the Apache Tomcat folder will have these subfolders within it. And one thing that we did was renamed our folder to Tomcat 10. And you don't have to do that, but it just simply makes referring to the folder a little bit easier. I also above talked about the environmental variable Catalina home. Now, fortunately, this is actually very easy to do to set this variable. All you have to do is go to the Windows search function, type in environmental variables. That will lead you to this screen right here. We're going to need to add a new variable called Catalina home, and you'll see here that I've set it to our Tomcat 10 folder. Note that we're going to build our project within this root folder, what I called project folder previously, and that's the Tomcat 10 folder. It will serve as the scaffolding for our project. Within that root Apache Tomcat directory, there are several subdirectories that we're going to talk about, really just the important ones, and they include. There's the web apps folder, which contains the web apps to be deployed. We're going to work a lot with this folder. Some of the files that we create, we're going to have to place in there. We have the lib or library folder. This contains the jar file-based libraries. We can also place other external libraries in there that we need. We have the log folder. This contains the log files to be used or to be read, and you can use that to determine what errors have occurred. We have the binary folder bin that contains the, essentially it contains the startup and shutdown scripts as well as related binaries. So when we actually start our servlet, you'll see we're going to go to our root folder /bin, and then in there we're going to call startup.bat or shutdown.bat, depending on what we're trying to do. And then we have the configuration folder, conf folder, and this contains system-wide configuration files. So next step is to reinstall the Java Development Kit. Now this is optional. When we ran this example, we found problems with our Java Development Kit installation, and as such, we decided to completely reinstall it
using these following steps, which I'm going to say in 1 second. Now, again, this is optional. You may not have that problem, but it's relatively short, this part of the process, so you may want to just do it regardless. Okay, the first step is to download the newest version of the JDK, the Java Development Kit, from the Oracle website, and that's just www.oracle.com/Java, and then it leads you to the, essentially you want to download the Java SE kit. Now, one thing I should note here, in the next module, you'll see we're actually going to end up uninstalling the newest version, which is JDK version 16, in favor of an older version, 11, to address some of the compilation issues we observed. So you'll have to use your judgment here. The good news is that the installation of version 11 is the way in which we install version 11 is the same as 16. We just use a different installer file. So we'll leave it up to you how to move forward. When I ran the code specifically in this module, I was using JDK version 16, and then it wasn't until the next module that we downgraded to version 11.
So after we download whatever version of the JDK that we are going to use, we'll install it to a location within our program files / Java folder. And we need to go back and play around with our environmental variables a little bit. So we're going to need to add Java bin, that folder, to the window environmental variables. It will be under system variables and then path. This ensures that methods from Java bin may be called within any folder, not just that specific one. Then we also need to go and set our Java_home environmental variable to the root folder of our JDK download, which is again right here. Note that JRE_home is different from Java_home. Initially, talked about this a second ago, we couldn't get Tomcat to work. And the problem this time was, this is a different problem than we had in the next module, was that our Java home environmental variable was set to the root folder of the Java runtime environment, as opposed to our version of the Java development kit. We recommend deleting any existing versions of JRE, the Java runtime environment, you have, as well as deleting the JRE home environmental variable, if it exists on your machine. Now, the newest version of JDK, I think it's version 10 or 11 above, do not provide explicit JRE folders, Java Runtime Environment folders. It's all integrated into one piece. And so you can see here, this is just an example from the Oracle website. So we picked the Windows 64-bit installer, and then I downloaded it. I clicked on it, and this is an example of the installation window. Here you can also see some of the other environmental variable related issues I talked about. So we go into environmental variables, then we click path, edit, and then we can go in here and add our C program files Java JDK16 bin folder to our path environmental variable. We then can go to another spot in our environmental variables. So you see path is up here under user variables for my username on my machine, but you also have the system variables, and that's where we are going to configure Java home as shown right here. You can see we already configured Catalina home. That was for Tomcat, and we should no longer have a JRE home environmental variable in there. Next step, step 2. Now the Tomcat configuration files are located in our conf subdirectory. We suggest that you back up these files in case an unintended change is made to them. Once this is done, we can configure our Tomcat server via the following steps or following changes. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is to set the port number in the server.xml file. Now, if you go into our root folder, again, this is our Tomcat 10 folder, and then /conf configuration folder, there's a file named server.xml. If we open that file, we'll see a variable named connector port equals something, which is going to be configured to 8080 by default. We can change this value, determining which port our servlet will listen to for incoming requests. So you can see here's my root folder right here, Tomcat 10. Again, I apologize. I should be calling this root folder, not project folder. I tried to be more explicit there. So if we go into our root folder, and then we also go into the configuration subfolder. I apologize for calling that conference. Configuration subfolder. We'll see here we have server.xml. And then when we open up that file, we see this variable here, connector port equals 8080. And then we can change this to something else if we want. All right, next, we want to enable automatic reload within content.xml. So within the same folder, this is again the configuration folder, there is a file named context.xml. If we set the reloadable variable to true, so I'll scroll up for one quick second, we have our context.xml file, and then we set the reloadable variable to true. So if we do that, then the output will be automatically reloaded when by the browser whenever code is updated. Now this is a nice function to have. It just means you don't have to shut down your server and start it up every time you change your code. So otherwise, you will have to manually refresh the browser. This step is not essential, but it does make debugging and testing a little bit easier. Next, we need to configure our environmental variables. I apologize. I think we've already done this above. We already set our Catalina home environmental variables, so we don't have to do that again. Now, the next question is, well, how do we know what port to use? Before we set up our server, we have to make sure, or we should make sure, that the port we're going to use is open on our machine. These ports, again, we listed it in server.xml. So how do we check for the open ports? We can do so using the netstat-an. We plug that into our command prompt or our terminal emulator in Windows, and what it'll do is provide us a list of the ports that are being used and some minimal description of how they're being used. So you're going to want to make sure that whatever port you choose for your servlet to listen is not one of those that is already in that list. Okay. Next, we are going to test Tomcat. So now that our machine and project are properly configured, we can call the start up, not star up, should be a T there, shell executable located within the project root /bin location. Sorry, I keep going back and forth with all these names. In each case, this is the Tomcat 10 folder. Okay, so if we go in here, you'll see we have our root folder /bin, and then you'll see we have our startup and our shutdown scripts are down there. Now, once this is complete, we have our configuration complete. Okay, Tomcat may be tested within the Windows command prompt and then using the browser as well. The command startup is used to start the server, just said that, and shutdown is used to end it. The only caveat is that the directory must be set to Catalina home/bin. Once the server is started, the index.html page may be accessed through the browser by simply copying and pasting this URL into your browser. Note here that for this example, I haven't changed the port number. I'm leaving it at 8080. Actually, let me see. What did I use? Yeah, I used 8080. I don't know why I put 999 right there. So we use the default port 8080, which again, if I scroll up for 1 second, you'll see that is the value that we left within our server.xml file. If we change that number, that means we would have to change it in our URL right here as well. Okay, so let's take a look at how I started up my server. This command right here, okay, or starts right here, is changing the directory to the root folder /bin. Okay, if you remember, it's in that folder that we have our startup command. Once that's done, our next command is going to be to actually call startup. You simply just type the word startup, and then the rest of all this right here is simply just the status updates provided by Tomcat. Now, once that's done, assuming you don't see any error messages, you can simply just bring up any browser and plug in localhost colon 8080. Now, this is not going to bring up our servlet. We haven't created that yet. However, what it is going to do is going to bring up this web page right here. And it says, if you're seeing this, you've successfully installed and started Tomcat. Congratulations. So that's just a nice way of confirming that at least
What we've done so far works. Our configuration of Apache Tomcat on our Windows machine is sound. We get that website, nice and easy, confirmation. So that's pretty much it for this module. Again, all we wanted to do was just set up Apache Tomcat on our machine and make sure that it works, which we've done. In the next module, we're going to build upon this. We're going to put some more files into that web apps folder and actually build and test our own servlet.